I think the next one should be called The Cloverfield Field. The Cloverfield Paradox. So this is the third film in the kind of connected, not really, maybe sort of now, film trilogy thing that is Cloverfield. I don't know what to call this series. So yeah, this whole thing was weird. This was a movie that I've been hearing about for, I don't know, about a year or so, and then it was supposed to come out, and then it got its release date moved, and then it got picked up by a different studio, and we were waiting for a new release date, and instead of getting a new release date, it just appeared on Netflix. And normally I'd say that that's weird and smells of dumping a junk movie, except that it really kind of fits with the weird roundabout way these movies have been marketed, to just have it suddenly appear like a viral video, like just out of nowhere, boom, here it is. You know, whatever marketing buildup there was just, you know, the fact that we knew it was coming, didn't know what it was, and that's very Cloverfield. So before I get into this, I suppose a little bit of my own history with this franchise. I remember the hype of that first Cloverfield movie. I actually got to see it before it came out officially. I managed to get into a preview screening, and it was the first film I ever saw to make me physically ill, because I don't think I'm excessively prone to motion sickness, but yeah, I had to leave the theater and throw up in a trash can because I couldn't make it to the bathroom. So that was my experience trying to watch the original Cloverfield. 10 Cloverfield Lane, I didn't catch in the theater, but caught on home video and loved. Last 10 minutes or so, you know, excluded. I think it should have cut off at a very specific point before it sort of goes into its last beat. But even with that intact, it's still a good movie and was really well acted, really tight, really tense. And now we've got the Cloverfield Paradox. So this, to me, is what will tip it over into being a worthwhile trilogy that had a weak start, or a not particularly good trilogy that somehow managed to have a gold middle entry. And it's kind of leaning towards that second one. So I am eventually going to talk spoilers in this. I'll start by not, and just give sort of my broad thoughts and broad strokes with as few spoilers as I can mention. And given that, honestly, so little is known about this movie, I feel like even talking about the premise is a spoiler. But I'm only going to go as far as say, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. It's like the main inciting incident, all right? If you don't even want to know that, maybe you should just check out now and just understand that I didn't think this was that great. I probably liked it more than the first Cloverfield, but that's mainly just because it didn't make me sick. So that's not a high bar to clear. In any case, so we're dealing in a probably near future, I don't think they actually say what year it takes place in, where there is a massive energy crisis. We don't have more details than that, but we don't need more details. The Earth is running out of power, and there are experiments being conducted with a particle accelerator in space, in orbit, that it's not really gone into detail as to whether it needs to be in space to work properly, or if it is actually utilizing the unique aspects of space to do something that it couldn't do on other. We don't really know. But somehow these experiments are going to provide a new source of energy for the planet basically before the lights go out and everything descends into utter chaos. So there's this crew up there working on this thing that have been at this for years. Like, they've just been up there trying to get this thing to work. And they're running out of tries to do it, because each time they fire it up to see if it works, they burn a bit more of their resources, and they basically only got enough for a few more goes on this thing. Well, and then they fire it up, and it appears to work. And then, as you would expect, something goes wrong. So the crew kind of get thrown about a little bit, look out the window, and the Earth is gone. That's it. They just look out and just see a whole lot of black, a whole lot of stars. As far as setups go for what is you know, and when I say setup, as far as now we're screwed little things go, going from a pretty standard setup of experiment in space goes wrong, suddenly having the Earth not there, that's a killer starting point. It really is. I mean, that's powerful, compelling, like, holy cow, what are the options here? You know, did we move in time? Did we move in space? Did the Earth move? Did, you know, what is it that happened? So many possibilities. And that, you know, captures when this thing is at its best, when you're looking at all the possibilities of what it could be and not knowing even how to begin narrowing them down. That's a lot of fun to work with. But as more of the pieces fall into place and exactly what's going on, first of all, it ends up being something that is really obvious because they blatantly set it up really early on in a very telegraphed manner that I think honestly might be the moment that sinks the entire film. I'll have to wait till spoilers to identify it by name, but between that and this thing needed to have me engage with these characters. I had to care about the people who are up on this station, and while they weren't bad, they weren't like horror movie fodder, you know, like, oh, just waiting for them to die. They weren't compelling. They weren't particularly good. I mean, to compare it to a movie that is thematically similar and has some similar, you know, of building blocks, the movie Sunshine by Danny Boyle, which is a very good movie, falls apart almost completely at the very end, but it is a really good movie, and that one worked, I think, just because we got to know these characters as people and not just as plot functions or exposition dumps. And, you know, you get a sense of their personalities beyond what their function on the ship is, and I never really felt like I got to know too many of these characters, and the few that I did get to know, it's like, boy, there's not a lot of depth to you, is there? And that's kind of a shame, because if I could have connected with these characters, it might have worked, because especially towards the end, there's one character in particular that if they haven't hooked you into this character, you're just kind of just watching to see where it goes. You're not invested. You're not going, ah, which if the, I suppose it's the nominal lead character of the whole piece did work for you and did connect with you and made you love the movie, awesome. I'm very happy for you. It didn't for me. So I think I need to start talking spoilers so I can get into some of my more specific nitpicks. I think part of the reason that I could not connect with this main lead, the character name I'm now having a hard time, I think it was Ava. I think the reason I couldn't connect with her is because the first few times we see her, she's not a character. She is one half of the exposition duo. And I mean that very literally. The film opens with her and her husband in this car delivering really, really badly written expositional dialogue, because she's been asked to go up and help on this project, and she is reluctant to do it, wants to stay on Earth with her husband. And, you know, he's trying to convince her to go because he believes it's important for her to take part in this. And he asks her, why do they need you up there? And instead of giving an answer like, because they trust me, because I'm the best, which still would have been cheesy, she basically launches into an explanation of the situation. Now, we'd already been getting snippets of news bits and a couple of actual contextual things that were showing us power's running out, there's an energy crisis, this thing gives hope. But she just sits there in this car and lays out exactly all the exposition. And then it happens again later when she has a communication call with her husband, basically after the time jumping forward montage to establish that they've been up there for a while. So right off the bat, I couldn't connect with her because I'm like, you're not a character, you're an exposition vehicle. But then they try and make her a character later. Well, I'll take that back. They don't try and make her a character. They try and bank on the idea that she is a character and you've latched onto her and care about her but I didn't because she didn't function as a character for too long. And eventually she did start to function as a character, but by the time she did, there had been basically no groundwork laid for me to really care about her. And I didn't really care about any of the characters particularly. None of them really grabbed me. I mean, Chris O'Dowd I like, so I was kind of predisposed to him, but I still, even something seemed off to me. I don't know. The whole thing was just weird. And okay, the single moment that I think honestly might well just kill the movie is the inclusion of the clip of Donald Logue talking about how what the particle accelerator is doing could tear holes in dimensions and there could be monsters and demons. He basically, with two words, monsters and dimensions, he basically spoiled the entire rest of the movie. Like, straight up. Having just heard him suggest that, the instant things happened, the instant the thing was gone, and as soon as I realized this was not a case of they got flung across the galaxy, basically when they found that other crew member in the wall, I knew, like, oh, alternate dimensions, got it. And that, of course, got my brain also taking over. Oh, okay, this is what caused the monsters and aliens and whatnot in the other Cloverfield movie, because those are alternate dimensions that have been damaged by the use of this thing. And the thing is, I figured this out pretty much definitely by about a half hour into the movie, and then had to sit through the rest of the movie, which was waiting to pay off those two things. It's like, yeah, I knew. So the final shot of a very large, full-grown Cloverfield monster, I didn't care. Like, yeah, I figured that. Actually, I did care. It irritated me because you'd already blatantly laid it out with Donald Logue. He didn't go so far as to literally explain exactly what was going to happen, but he laid out exactly how we got here, and he laid out something that connects now all three films that otherwise were unconnected. But you had to just show the monster, because you had to have that gut punch at the end, didn't you? And that's just not having any faith in your audience for us to follow the fact that, yeah, I got that already. No, let's literally stick one in because we think it'll be punchy and maybe people will cheer or something. So there seems to be a lack of faith in the audience in terms of laying this stuff out, because I think overall the movie would have worked a lot better if things either had not been explained at all to the degree that they were, or I think probably even the better option would have been save the explanation so for when the characters find out this information. And I don't just mean that in terms of making it blatant. I mean, like, don't drop obvious hints that the characters are going to ignore, and as they work their way through trying to figure out what's going on. That was what was really frustrating, because the Donald Logue thing, I hope he was well paid for his time. What a waste. But they're watching this newscast and this commentator and whatnot, and so they see him propose this notion. And I'm not saying that it should be somebody's automatic response, oh, that guy on TV was right. But when something bizarre and crazy happens and you have no idea how it happened, you'd think somebody would have gone, do you think that guy on the TV was right? But they don't, which makes them dumb and makes me, as an audience member, well ahead of them, which makes me frustrated with them because they have to catch up to me, which makes me disconnect from the film. So things like that, and sticking a Cloverfield monster at the end to make it obvious for anyone when the cheap seat's way in the back who maybe wasn't paying enough attention to get it already. I just think it could have worked a lot better with a lot of that stuff removed and a lot more stuff implied, especially in terms of the interconnectedness of these things. It does another thing that I think is dumb. And actually, it's funny that I mentioned Sunshine earlier, because Sunshine did something similar, which is that out of nowhere we get a human villain. And that's dumb because the circumstances are already so dire, the stakes are so high, the situation's so treacherous. We don't need a human villain. I mean, at all. The circumstances are the villain. The circumstances are all the complications and issues and problems they have to deal with. There's plenty of that. We don't need a human villain as well. And boy, that one's doubly frustrating because the whole thing with her, they do something that I hate, which is they have a character that, and to be clear, I buy her motivation for what she does or tries to do at the end. But at the same time, though I buy it on paper, I still hate it in execution because it does what I hate that these things tend to do, which is to basically have a character make a decision to do something that is not a good thing for reasons that maybe wouldn't cause me to reach the same conclusion but make sense, but then have them behave in the same way that you would have a character behave who is being evil because they enjoy it. Like, there's no sense of conflict in her and what she's doing. Like, she says, I don't want to do this. I'm like, you could have fooled me because you are behaving in the manner that a maniacal villain who's been plotting this from the beginning would be behaving. And so, yeah, that was dumb when it started, and then it was dumber in execution. And I'm realizing I don't have a whole lot positive to say about this. It's not awful, it really isn't, but it's just, I don't know, it's just bland. And it's an idea and a concept that I would have liked, but it's just all down to the execution. The exposition is really clunkily handled. The performances are fine, but not particularly spectacular. There's a lot wrong in terms of the conclusion. They don't trust their audience enough to actually roll with some of these notions and ideas without being told them bluntly, which is actually extra insulting because when you do an idea this sci-fi, like, sci-fi people love looking for the connections. When a sci-fi movie talks down to you the way that this movie talks down to you, it's really kind of insulting. Just because of the nature of the genre, the nature of this fandom, they love picking through the minutia and looking at every little thing and making the connections, and this film doesn't seem to have any faith that they're going to be able to do that. So all of that's irritating. And it also doesn't help that, like, there's a lot that just doesn't make sense. Like, they say dimension jumping or dimension merging or whatever. Okay. How does that have the wall eat people? How does that remove a guy's arm that now behaves completely independent? How does that get a colony of worms stuffed inside another guy? How? No explanation. And it's to the point where I just feel like if you're going to make a blatant explanation, if you're going to say this is why this is happening, but the explanation you gave doesn't inherently make you go, oh, now I understand how all that stuff happened, then you should have done one of two things. You either should have explained further for the instances that don't make sense inherently with the premise you gave, or you need to not be as blatant in the first place. Just have them focus on getting home however they can think to do it, and don't worry about explaining it. Just go with something went wrong, now everything's screwed up. They didn't find the balance between how engaging their unanswered questions were and how much of an answer they should actually give. And I think they either needed to be more exhaustive or actually my preference would have just to be, don't explain nearly as much as you do, because I think it would have been better. And there's a lot on paper that I feel like could have worked about this. I feel like making it a Cloverfield movie because I'm pretty sure it wasn't originally, which is the same thing that happened to 10 Cloverfield Lane. And I feel like the stuff inserted upon it to make it fit the Cloverfield brand was most of what was dragging it down in the end. So now that we've actually had a film that offers an explanation to explain why the things that happened in the other Cloverfields happen and gives a vague way that they're interconnected, can we stop? So, the Cloverfield Paradox. I keep wanting to call it the God Particle because that was the working title for so long. But in any case, did you see it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. I don't know if I'm going to tick off this particular fandom. I don't know if Cloverfield has rabid fans or not. It has a very speculative fan community, but I don't know if they're as defensive as I don't know, Marvel fans or DC fans or Star Wars fans or any of the other fans who I have a tendency to tick off. I'm sure I'll find out. In any case, whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Do all that stuff. Check me out on Patreon. Follow me on Twitter. Listen to my podcast. Links for all this stuff is down in the description. And until next time, this council is adjourned.